What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the SFS channel and our final rest of season rankings video for our wide receiver position here. In this episode, I'll be breaking down my top 30 wideouts here for the fantasy football playoffs. So I'll be taking into consideration playoff schedule heavily and obviously upside for those games. Now, what I'm not going to be doing in this episode is kind of detracting from the value of players that have a week 14 bye and won't be with us this week. So the Packers, the Colts, the Commanders, the Bears, Saints. I'm forgetting one other team, the Falcons. I think I might have said them already, but I'm not sure. Anyways, those 6 teams will not be seeing their rankings slided here in this episode because of those bye weeks. This is primarily focused on giving you a lens into those week 15 through 17, possibly week 18, depending on your league playoff schedule. So, with all that said, keep that stuff in consideration for today's episode, and let's dive right on into our first tier. Alright, here we go. So for today's episode, we have 8 total tiers to break down. Tier 1, I'm not going to spend too much time on here. Even Tier 2, these players to me, schedule doesn't intimidate me that much with these elite blue chip wide receiver 1 A-tier type players. The order isn't particularly important to me because we know who these great players are, but I do have Devontae Adams with his hot streak as of late. We'll find out. This video is coming out on Thursday morning, so by Thursday evening, if he stinks it up in his matchup against the Rams, you guys can roast me for that or whatever if these other players outscore him, but I do have him as either the wide receiver 1 or the wide receiver 2 for the current point in time here. He has been scoring a whole lot of points. That Raiders offense has been firing on all cylinders between him and Josh Jacobs. Anyways, though, like I said, that's not entirely important to me, the order, as a matter of fact. So it's Devontae Adams, Justin Jefferson, it's Tyreek Hill, it's Stephon Diggs, who thankfully here in week 14 is getting that second matchup with Sauce Gardner and the Jets out of his way. So again, schedule not super important to me here. Does play somewhat of a factor, but these are the best of the best players as it relates to tier 1. Let's dive into tier 2. Here we go. So these 2 tiers absolutely show me the depth of the elite players we have at the wide receiver position. I mean, I feel like I want to have each of these players ranked higher, but the fact that this is our top 8 is absolutely insane here. So for Jamar Chase, it's an above average, easy schedule here for him going forward the rest of the way. We know the Cincinnati offense is great. He caught 7 of his 8 targets for 97 yards against Kansas City in his first week back after the hairline hip issue. Full confidence in him going forward. A.J. Brown, arguably the easiest schedule for pass catchers is the Philadelphia Eagles. A.J. Brown's a freaking beast. Him and Jalen Hurts have really good chemistry. So this could potentially result in him, maybe going even higher on this list. I see a very hard scenario for him, falling below our expectations down the stretch of this season. CeeDee Lamb, he is emerging as of late. He looks like the dog alpha wide receiver 1 that we've been projecting for him essentially since he came into the NFL in 2020. He's getting that job done now. I don't view him necessarily quite as high as AJ and Jamar Chase, which is why we've got him, obviously in the same tier. He's on the same level of playing field, but that ranking is a little bit lower at that number 7 spot here. And then for Amon-Ra St. Brown, his ceiling is very good. His floor is even better. He's catching a high volume of passes every week. He's getting targets. He's getting opportunities. He's been fantastic this year. Like I said, I want to have some of these guys ranked even higher, but it's just so hard to move them above the competition. You can easily make an argument for Amon-Ra over CeeDee Lamb, but for right now, that's how we have the rankings. Again, I'm not too particularly concerned about order for these top 2 tiers here. We can debate and bicker about that in the comment section, but as we get forward and moving down the list here, that's where things get a bit more interesting. Next up here, tier 3. This is a fun one. So we're starting it out with our wide receiver 9 here, DK Metcalf, who's been absolutely killing it as of late. I love his ceiling. He is so talented. Obviously, Geno Smith has been far better than expected this year. Still one of the more interesting stories to follow throughout the season. I really hope Seattle can get in the playoffs. They are currently obviously looking like they're going to, but I want to see that man getting some big-time football, high-intensity atmosphere pressure here. Should be exciting stuff to watch. But DK has been absolutely phenomenal. Love his ceiling. Again, he's been killing it and crushing it this year. Nuke Hopkins, I've got him a little bit lower at the number 10 spot than consensus may here. The reason I'm lower on him is the trend historically throughout Kyler Murray's career is that he kind of tends to fade down the stretch of seasons and things start to get a bit sloppy and ugly. You've got all the comments about how they're schematically effed and everything. Hopkins has still been fine for fantasy football throughout that process, but it does concern me about his ceiling a little bit, and obviously just negativity in that building is a little troubling as well. Going a little bit beyond the analytics there with that assessment, but I do obviously still have him as a top 10 wide receiver, so I've got plenty of respect for him there. I just feel like the risk factors are a little bit more high than they would tend to be with other players. Jalen Waddle, his ceiling may be the highest of anyone in this tier. His floor, unfortunately, probably also the lowest. Obviously, he's been dinged up a little bit as of late. Tua has had his fair share of beatings throughout this season in terms of physically. Their team isn't getting smoked. Like, he's literally just getting tossed around like a rag doll, and whether it's the really scary concussion situation earlier in the year, and obviously going to Skylar Thompson for a little bit, or it's this past week with the ankle injury, missing the final series. It seems to be something that's, I shouldn't say it's a trend. It's really not, but it's been present throughout this year. So for Jalen Waddle, of course, he can go out there, erupt, do Tyreek Hill level of things with his explosiveness in the open field, right after catchability, all that great stuff. He is also the number 2 option in this offense, though. So he's consistently seeing less volume. He's consistently the 1B option, and that's obviously going to affect his floor a little bit. Same thing goes for T. Higgins. Insanely talented, great size, speed, wingspan, all that stuff. Great offense as well, just like Jalen Waddle is in Miami. It just comes down to ceiling versus floor. His ceiling, obviously, is quite good. We saw this last week. He ended up going out there and making some really good plays. And in other weeks, he can have some down performances. So stuff to keep in mind here. Here's our wide receiver 12 for the rest of the year. Tier 4 now, kicking it off with our wide receiver 2s, technically based on just numbers. Obviously, with numbers 1 through 12 in a 12-team format are your wide receiver 1s. 13 through 24 are going to be those wide receiver 2s. It's 13 through 16 in this tier. Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns kicking us off. Now, he's got an average playoff schedule the rest of the way this season, and the reason I've got him up here is because I think his upside is so high. Now, he's really dependent on Deshaun Watson's ability to shake that rust off and get his game moving here down the stretch of the season, but I am confident in what Amari brings to the table. For Chris Godwin here, it's a volume game between him and Tom Brady. Now, there is some tough matchups. We've got San Francisco coming up this week, which, again, it's not a playoff matchup. But regardless, the tougher matchups are going to be an obstacle for this Bucs offense that has struggled to really consistently deliver a high-ceiling passing game throughout the year. But for Chris Godwin, he has been the favorite target when healthy this year, and obviously continues to soak up that good volume in the slot. He actually just got a touchdown called off last week that would have been a big deal for his fantasy value in Week 13, but it happens. Tyler Lockett has had one of the best floors in fantasy football this season. Absolutely shocking. I could not have predicted that. He's only had 2 games below 12 PPR points this year. That is elite. This is a guy that essentially is on his way to finishing as a wide receiver 1 in fantasy because of his consistency. It's like Keenan Allen type stuff here that we've seen in years past. So very impressive, tipping the cap to you, Tyler Lockett. And then Garrett Wilson, kind of the surging rookie wide receiver right now. He has been doing some amazing things back-to-back weeks. Fantastic production and performances from him. 162 yards. The week prior, he had 2 touchdowns and 88 yards, I want to say, 86 yards maybe, catching 5 of his 8 targets. So really, really great stuff there. As long as Mike White continues to be the starting quarterback for this team, he is very much so a strong wide receiver to start and an elite flex player if you've got yourself 2 other solid options. Okay, so diving into Tier 5 now. This is actually really odd. I didn't plan to do this or try to do this whatsoever, but I'm realizing that literally every single tier has 4 players in it, which say what you will, is at least interesting to me that I have now just noticed this progressing through today's episode. But Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, Christian Watson, and Christian Kirk. Christian is squared here at the bottom of the tier. For Terry McLaurin, it's boomer bust potential. Taylor Heineke is a gunslinger, a playmaker. It absolutely pisses me off when the broadcasters compare him to Brett Favre every single week. But 2 different players. I know he throws the football downfield and does some risky stuff, but in terms of arm talent, it's night and day here. Regardless, though, Terry McLaurin benefits from having Taylor Heineke because Terry McLaurin is a damn good wide receiver. Runs great routes. He's athletic as hell. Makes big-time plays. So his ceiling on a week-to-week basis, very good for your lineups. Keenan Allen here, rock-solid wide receiver 2. His ceiling isn't great, but his floor is pretty solid. Historically, it's been very good for this Chargers team. Volume is actually down a little bit right now, though. Herbert's been spreading the ball around the field. I would like to see him zone into his top targets a little bit more. I think Josh Palmer has more that he could contribute to this team, but not every single week is he getting the opportunities that I think he should, especially with Mike Williams out of the lineup. Christian Watson here, sky-high ceiling, man. This is a guy that is going absolutely ballistic right now. 8 touchdowns in a 4-game stretch. Love what I'm seeing from him. He's not your prototypical traditional wide receiver, but he's an explosive playmaker. He's getting the job done, and he's become the clear lead receiver for that Packers offense. He could be a league-winning league-winning asset here for lineups, especially, again, like I said, Garrett, if he's playing that flex level position for you. And then Christian Kirk, really solid slot receiver, getting the volume for that Jacksonville Jaguars offense. He doesn't hit every week, but when he does, it's very, very solid, and he's been a really dependable lineup contributor this season. Okay, so we've got ourselves yet another tier of 4 players on it. That's 6 straight tiers. I can assure you the last 2 do not have 4 players in them. That is very odd how that played out in today's video, but that hasn't happened once throughout one of these episodes this season. But for Chris Olave here at the number 1 spot, this is an absurdly talented route runner, a very impressive playmaker. He can stretch the field vertically at such a high level. However, Andy Dalton is really all that needs to be said here. I don't think he is the man for the job to facilitate the highest level of ceiling for Chris Olave. They are on a bye week this week, so obviously not having him in your lineups, again, that does not detract his ranking or, drop him down the list any today, but just figured I'd note it here. I guess I didn't with some other players that were on bye like Christian Watson, but besides the point, back to our regularly scheduled program here. Olave is a monster. I love his ceiling, but like I said, I don't think he can fully realize his fantasy football potential with the current quarterback and offensive situation here, which is unfortunate. Devontae Smith might be the best number 2 in an offense aside from Tyler Lockett in fantasy football right now. I guess, okay, that was a terrible take because you've got Jalen Waddle and T. Higgins who are in their number 2s of their respective offenses. But besides the point, get back to it here. Devontae Smith has an incredibly easy playoff schedule, as we mentioned with A.J. Brown. The big things could happen here. He is a bombshell for 100-plus yards and a touchdown any week. He just needs the targets and the opportunity. He is insanely good at running routes. He is almost always open, especially working against number 2 coverage frequently. This guy can do a lot of things for your lineups. Deebo Samuel and Mike Evans might be living off of past reputations a little bit here, sitting down at the wide receivers 23 and 24 spots, clinging to their wide receiver 2 value for dear life. However, Deebo potentially seeing an uptick in work here with Brock Purdy. Maybe there's more line of scrimmage passes that don't go straight to Christian McCaffrey because they don't want to try and throw the ball downfield with them. There's been a lot of positive Brock Purdy talk throughout the week. I've been by far one of the more pessimistic players in the community about him, but that's just my thoughts on going down to your 3rd-string quarterback. And while he did look decent against the Dolphins, I've also seen some pretty heinous stuff from him in very brief stints this season. Mike Evans here, like I said, living off of past reputations. He has been miserable this year. I will say it. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again. No touchdowns since week 4. This guy is supposed to live off of touchdowns and red zone production. They don't give him the ball in the red zone. He hasn't been able to connect on some of the deep shots Brady's taken to him. And overall, the volume has been empty calories. It just hasn't sustained or materialized into anything sustainable in your lineups here. Again, the talent and the playmaking ability is there. The points are not. It's the 2-man tier here for my wide receivers 25 and 26. It's Juju Smith-Schuster and Hollywood Brown. For Juju, I like the role he plays in this offense. They need someone else besides Travis Kelce to step up, and Juju was that guy prior to his injury. Kadarius Toney's banged up right now. Juju's the clear number 1 option. He just needs to get that volume and get rolling back after the catch. His schedule is very difficult, though. He is probably one of the tougher guys, if not the toughest schedule remaining here for the fantasy playoffs. It starts with this Week 14 matchup, which, again, isn't really factored into today's rankings, but I'll mention it. Denver, very, very tough against the pass, so I'm thinking about that if starting him this week. And then Hollywood Brown is the number 2 in Arizona's offense. We talked about the concerns with Kyler Murray back at the top of the Hopkins take here, but for Brown, I'd like to see him get incorporated a bit more in the vertical passing game and have them take advantage of some of his wheels downfield as it relates to obviously contributing to a great fantasy ceiling here, whereas he was more of a volume play early in the year as the wide receiver 1 without Hopkins due to suspension. Last tier here, yet another 4-man group, so literally 7 of our 8 tiers were 4 guys. That was not planned whatsoever, but it looks very orderly straight down the line here for today's tier episode. So it's DJ Moore taking home the wide receiver 27 spot. We all know his ceiling is good. He's a very talented player, and thankfully it'll be the PJ Walker / Sam Darnold, probably the Sam Darnold show, from here on out. And those are guys that I at least trust more than Baker Mayfield, who is now an LA Ram. Good news to me, good news to DJ Moore owners. He's still going to be a streaky play, but I think that you can at least count on or project or hope, cross your fingers for, a ceiling performance a bit more than you previously could have. Michael Pittman Jr. here, not much ceiling to speak of, but he does have a semi-respectable floor this past week against Dallas. It was terrible, but he's a talented player. He's a good possession receiver. He can do some stuff downfield as well. Indy needs to try and push the needle by throwing the ball downfield to these big perimeter bodies a little bit more. You heard Chris Collinsworth literally vomiting about that, 100 times during the broadcast. But anyways, that would contribute a bit more to Pittman's fantasy stock and value. Again, ceiling isn't too great here, but it is a really skilled player. Brandon Ayuk, he's only down here because of the question marks I have about Brock Purdy. Again, I'm a little bit more pessimistic than most are about that scenario, but for Ayuk, I just expect overall the passing involvement downfield, which he thrives off of. He's so efficient. He's so good catching passes on time and obviously getting out of his breaks and being a great route runner. I think he's the most natural receiver on this team. I just don't know if they do that as much with Brock Purdy. I think they lean in the run game, the really quick passing game a bit more. We'll see how this impacts his volume going forward, but I do have my concerns. And then Mike Williams, he's hurt. He's got an ankle injury. We know who he is, though, when he's healthy. He looked like he was going to do big things. Was at Kansas City the week he came back and then caught the ball on the sideline, but turned his ankle and has been out ever since. It's a matter of health here. He rises up the list when he gets healthy, maybe brings Keenan Allen down a little bit more when he comes back, but that's a story and obviously a scenario to break down when he is actually back on the field. He is at practice, though, which is worth noting. So there you guys have it, our top 30 wide receiver tiers and rankings for Week 14. Our playoff rankings here, though, heading into this big-time postseason. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. If you want to see these rankings update in live time, as I am tinkering with them throughout the coming weeks this season, check out sizzlefantasy.com. You can get access to these rankings on there under our SFS Gold drop-down menu. Otherwise, if you sign up for Underdog Fantasy using code SFS, that's my personalized code here for this channel, and supporting the channel by doing so when you deposit $10 or more will get you double your money, as well as access to our entire website and myself, which includes DMing me on our Discord server, asking me your lineup questions, and having me help you during the most pivotal times of this season. You can get access to all that stuff, again, when you sign up for Underdog using code SFS and deposit $10 or more. So thank you guys so much. Take advantage of those services, and I'll see you in a future episode. We've got the running back segment out today as well. Check it out. See you there. Peace out.